Okay, it works. Okay, so we are back here at the OSS, the Open Security Summit. This time we have an Ask Me Anything with Dr. Gary McGraw, the person, the legend, the one. So just to remind our listeners how this goes, we start with a little intro for the unaware, those few of us that may not know Gary. Then some questions that we got from all kinds of places. And in the end, we open up for live questions. So talking about Gary, it's one of those things. Whenever we have one of these, I start with a slide where I try to write the accomplishments or the most interesting points about someone. And this was one of the cases where repeatedly I saw myself making the font smaller and smaller and smaller because I just had to keep putting stuff in and stuff in and stuff in. So at some point I had to find a way to rethink the whole thing. How do I talk about Gary and what he's done? So this is InfoSec's own Renaissance man. He is a pioneer. I think that it's very safe to say that many of us are in this field here today because of the things that he wrote, because of the things that he said, because of the things that he taught. He is also a philosopher. So none of only that move the beats and show me the results thing. The man sits and thinks very, very deeply about the stuff that he cares about. He is a scientist, a computer scientist, naturalist, and he is very interested in all those things that make the world around us go the way it goes. He is a sailor with Team Tartan. Go Team Tartan. He is a philanthropist working very, very hard on Kiva, on microloans, on the, again, with Team Tartan on the leukemia regatta every year, raising a lot of funds for a lot of good causes, and definitely go to his site and look for the stuff that he has in there. There's some very, very worthy stuff. He's a very, very well-regarded musician. He is a pioneer. Again, we wouldn't probably be here in the same way that we are if it wasn't for his early work.
I think my most famous gig was with Dennis.
And he is an entrepreneur. He started a bunch of different companies and he led them to very nice places, and things that we work on today come from his work in that capacity. He's also the creator of the BISIM, the Build Security in Maturity Model, which today is a standard for measuring the effectiveness of the SSDLC in companies. He is, among other things, the founder of the IEEE Center for Secure Design, where I had the pleasure of first meeting him. And he is the co-founder and currently working very hard on the Berryville Institute of Machine Learning, where he's tackling problems of security in machine learning.
I wore my machine learning shirt today, too.
Yeah,
there you
that's
go.
the one. Now, he is also the bane of one's existence if you are a security researcher out there. And I have to explain that. Whenever you get people together and they are thinking about the big problems of information security, it is very, very rare to be able to think about something and somebody doesn't say, yeah, Gary wrote about that back in blah, 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 19 something. The man has been there for a long, long time. He has defined areas of study. He has opened up complete venues of approach to problems that back then everybody was looking at him and saying, where do you come up with these things? And problems that we keep seeing them again and again and again. Every time that we have a new technology, some old problem comes up in a new way. And chances are that Gary was there before. So I think in the name of all of us, thank you.
It's my pleasure to be here and talk about all that stuff.
So without further ado, we got some questions for you, and feel free to expand as much as you want on them and go anywhere you want with the answers.
Okay.
So the first one is the AI in the room. How are you approaching the moving target of security in machine learning and artificial intelligence?
Well, let's see. I used to work on machine learning and artificial intelligence in grad school in the 90s. And I actually wrote my thesis with a guy some of you may heard of called Doug Hofstetter, who wrote a fantastic book, Go to Lescherbach, which made me want to go get my PhD with him. So I did. And, I did my thesis work on Doug's ideas, but I also did a lot of work on neural networks and case-based reasoning, genetic algorithms. And it turns out that the technology that people are talking about today, namely deep learning, machine learning methods that use neural networks, are pretty much the same as they were back in 1995. I think 1989 was the first time I wrote a neural network model. So when I retired, I was like, gosh, I wonder if we've really made as much progress as everybody thinks we've made in machine learning. So we started reading papers. And of course, like would happen with all you guys, as soon as I started reading the papers, I was like, wow, these people are not really thinking much about security at all. We better start thinking about that. And so with a group of people locally here, we founded the Berryville Institute of Machine Learning. And the way we keep up is by reading research papers, some of which are peer reviewed, some of which are just posted on archive that appeal to us. And we've probably read, over 200 papers so far. We put an entry into our annotated bibliography every time we read one, some ideas and thoughts that we have. And you're welcome to check those out at berryvilleiml.com. Under references, you'll find our annotated bibliography. One thing that can get you going fast is we actually have an opinion about what the top 5 papers are. So you can get started reading quickly and, move along quickly. As every part of computer security and every part of technology, everything goes very, very fast. But if you get a handle on it, you can keep up. So give it a shot. There's lots of room for lots of people to work on machine learning security right now.
Very, very cool. I had totally forgotten that you had done your thesis with Professor Hofstadter, and that must have been like a whole world of different stories and stuff to tell.
Oh my God, it was so fun. Yeah, I would go to grad school with Doug again, and I still get to see him, when I go back to Bloomington, where my son is now getting a PhD in cognitive science.
Nice.
I get to see Doug and say hi. So yeah, those were great times. Lots of hilarious stories. Doug is still very active in cognitive science and still has thoughts that are probably 30 or 40 years ahead of everybody else.
And the first book of his, I mean, that's one of those that you can't read only once, even though it's a very thick tome. You cannot read that thing only once. It has
well worth a read. And if you're interested in computer theory, computer science theory, it's the best introduction to computer science theory you'll ever get.
Indeed it is. The second one that we have. So you used to have the Silver Bullet, the podcast, which was again one of the first information security podcasts out there, and it was extremely entertaining. But thinking about the idea of the Silver Bullet, hey, security tools as silver bullets, right? What is your opinion of the current status of security tools?
I think we've made a lot of progress in some areas. For example, when I was first started working in software security or application security, there weren't any static analysis tools. So we used to check code by hand. And of course, we thought, gosh, we should have a computer do this. It's so boring. Computers are great at boring stuff. Let's make them do that. So we've made lots and lots of progress there, but we haven't made that much progress in other aspects of software security, like design review. I'm happy to say that companies are beginning to emerge that are working on that, like Arius Risk, who I'm a technical advisor for. But we have lots and lots of work to do in automating some aspects of computer security, especially software security. So my opinion is lots of progress, plenty more to be made. We should automate everything that we possibly can, but the thing that we can't do yet is automate an expert.
Yep, exactly. So bringing us back to the security in ML and AI, it used to be that back in the last century, people loved expert systems, which was basically a database of facts and a lot of if, then, else that would bring you out to a template of things based on some input.
Yeah, it's
And
basically called symbolic AI.
Exactly. And to this day, people keep saying, hey, we have problems today that we can solve this way. Like design review, for example, or even some people seem to think, I don't agree, but threat modeling.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion of where ML and AI are going to take us in terms of security tools, taking into consideration that, yes, we tried the expert systems and it didn't end well?
Yeah.
Didn't end well enough.
It's way too early to tell. Though we've made a lot of progress on machine learning models in some domains. Those domains tend to be formalized and closed. So for example, we have AlphaGo that can play Go better than any human being. That's interesting, but Go turns out not to be an open system. You know, it's got lots of possibility space, but not infinity. Mm-hmm. And so we're not so good, on the other hand, at general intelligence so far. We have some large language models that appear to be kind of smart, but if you poke into them a little, you find out that they're really parrots that have just been trained up on Reddit. So they do a lot of very silly things, and they don't have any real concepts or ideas. Instead, they're just very, very clever parrots. So the question is whether those technologies are going to be useful for security. And in some sense, if you're doing anomaly detection or you're looking for weird things that are happening that stick out like a sore thumb, you can use machine learning for that. That would be very useful. But for something like design review, that is even hard for a human to learn how to do. Sometimes it takes years to learn how to do. We have a long, long way to go. So I don't think we're going to see any machine learning for, say, security design analysis anytime soon.
So I have a very limited knowledge of machine learning. So what I'm hearing you say is that in things where we have these huge data sets that we can say this is the normal baseline situation, and we can feed to these ML engines, then we can extract some form of detection because we can recognize something that's out of the baseline.
Yeah. For example, when we're doing intrusion detection. But of course, then clever attackers will adjust accordingly. So, you know, one idea from, gosh, this is a National Science Foundation and DARPA work almost 20 years ago, was looking at statistical methods of intrusion detection. And a woman named Teresa Lunt moved the operational profile of what was acceptable way over here to attack land, did an attack, and then moved it way back over here. So the machine never really recognized an attack. And that's the sort of thing that you can do as an attacker that might not be anticipated by simple applications of machine learning. So I don't think it's a magic silver bullet. And ironically, of course, you know, I named my podcast Silver Bullet as a joke because I was alluding to Fred Brooks's paper about no silver bullet.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, well, there is one now, but sadly, it's just a podcast.
So the next one that we have is going completely to another area of your recent work. Now that you look back at the results and the achievements of BISIM, so what are the top things that we can learn from it?
I think two things come to mind. Number one is if you find a bunch of like-minded people that are willing to share their data and you collect data carefully, you can describe what's happening out in the world. Brian Chess and I used to jokingly refer to the BSIM as our anthropology project because we thought of it more as observational anthropology than anything else. And remember, when we set out to do the BSIM, we were just gathering data and wondering what we were going to find. And then we were describing what we were going to find. And then we found out we could use that as a measuring stick. And the thing just took on a life of its own. So number one lesson is go out and look and carefully gather a lot of data. And you'll be surprised what emerges from that. Number two is, I sort of alluded to this already, community really matters. The BSIM is a very powerful community of people who were interested in sharing what they knew and what they were doing. When we first started the BSIM, for example, Microsoft was a member, and Steve Lipner was participating in the BSIM. And he was just as interested to find out what everybody else was doing as we were. Mm-hmm. So we weren't all following some magic way of software security. We were all working together collectively to describe what was working for that group. And it turned into a de facto standard. So I'm very proud of that work. It's still going on. I haven't done anything with the BSIM since BSIM 9 myself. But Sammy and other people at Synopsys are still pushing the BSIM every year or so.
So going back to that route, when you guys were deciding what corpus of data you're going to collect, was there anything that people said, no, this is something that we don't want to share?
No, because I had the advantage of knowing the people we were talking to personally, so we trusted each other. They knew I wasn't going to do anything bad with their data, and they knew I wasn't going to out them for bad behavior or whatever.
Oh, so only you had access to the whole data. They weren't.
That's right. That's okay. Right. So, but when we had a big enough collective, we could say things about the data without exposing any individual firm. Mm-hmm. That was extremely, extremely valuable. We were very, very careful with that. And one thing that set, say, BSIM apart from something like OpenSAM was that data. The measurements that came from hundreds of firms over a decade, over time, was just a powerful, powerful data set. So Sammy wrote a paper with Lori Williams from North Carolina State recently, which you might want to check out, which just describes what the most kind of the easy way to get started according to the BSIM. And that's well worth a read. So we're still taking a look at the data and using it to drive software security in ways that, you can't do with just an opinion. You have to have a bag of facts to drag along in order to do that. So
you mentioned Microsoft. Can you give us some other names that were in the BSIM, just so that people can get an idea of the weight of this data?
Sure. I mean, we had 19 out of 20 of the top largest banks in the world. So just about everyone you can think of: Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, as examples. We had a lot of tech companies: Adobe, Qualcomm. We had some insurance companies. We had some, healthcare companies. Aetna comes to mind. There are a number of different verticals that are covered in the BSIM too. So we can compare how banks are doing to how tech firms are doing, which is kind of interesting. Right now, I think there are maybe 130 or so firms. I can't really remember because I haven't been directly involved, but the data set is still growing.
So you touched into something really interesting, the different verticals. So if you look at healthcare and banks, and I'm guessing that you even had some defense in there.
Not much.
No? I thought that
No, what's weird, even though Cigital was based in Washington, D.C. area, in Northern Virginia, we didn't do much work with the government.
So we're going to touch that on a further question, so save that one for that.
Sure.
But in those different verticals, healthcare and banks, for example, is there anything that jumps to mind that surprised you that was different in between them?
I think my favorite thing was in the beginning, when we were doing the BSIM in the beginning, the banks would say, well, we're using this static analysis tool, so we're interested in talking about these problems with the software companies. And the software companies would say, oh yeah, but your software is different than our software. We're software companies and you're banks, so the software is different. And the bank said, wait a minute, don't you guys use Fortify and Coverity? Those are the same tools we use.
Lines of code.
it turned out that the software guys bullshit wasn't working anymore because everybody was using the same tools. There was no magic that the guys at Microsoft had in their code. It was just code. And that was really, really fun and interesting.
Now, I don't remember when I looked at this thing for the last time, but did it also measure the use of internal tools versus things that you get from somewhere else?
Sometimes we found internal tools. For example, Microsoft had some tools that would help them crawl their code base looking for attacks that hadn't been found in the wild that they became aware of through their own research. And that was very, very advanced stuff, but they were able to do that.
Oh, it sounds interesting. It's almost Emacs versus VI. Threat model?
It is almost, yeah.
Or architectural design review?
Wait a minute, I'll be right back. It's gonna take me 5 seconds to get this. Oh. This hangs in my bathroom. I think you guys are gonna like this. Let's see if you can read it.
Oh gosh. I want that.
Mac versus VI, whatever, just wash your hands.
I want that. I need one of those.
Exactly. I think that any time we pay to talk about flaws as opposed to bugs, that's good. And automating one approach or the other doesn't really matter so much. The thing that I used to be upset about the term threat modeling is just this. It's nomenclature that came out of the war vocabulary from the UK, because it turns out that gosh, I'm having a hard time remembering who did what. It turns out that the Microsoft guys were from New Zealand, and so they used the term threat in a way that we use the term risk. And in the United States war nomenclature, we say threat to mean an actor or agent, a person or an entity, as opposed to a risk. And so threat modeling was really supposed to mean risk modeling, but it just got picked up by Microsoft and shoved down everybody's throat. So now we use that term, and that's fine. It doesn't really matter what we call it. What does matter is that we focus on the thing itself, the architecture of the software that we're analyzing, more than we worry about nation state attackers or this guy or a dog or whatever. We need to think about mistakes in the design that are just fundamental errors that need to be corrected. And that's what I like to call flaws. I still think that flaws and bugs are about 50-50. So if you're automating looking for bugs and fixing them, that's fantastic. Yep. What are you doing about flaws?
Right. Now, I think that I know the answer, but when you threat model, do you have like a methodology that you prefer to follow, or do you free flow?
I mean, of course, I have a methodology that I wrote down in chapter 5 of software security called architecture risk analysis. And that's still how I do it to this day. It has 3 major parts. I like to follow that because then we do it the same way each time. 2 of those parts, by the way, are pretty easy to automate. One is looking for known problems that you've seen before, so you have a list. And the other is thinking about your dependencies. Hilariously, all this SBOM stuff that everybody's all excited about that they think is going to cure all the world's problems, which it's not, is really just about dependencies. And that is a key aspect of architecture risk analysis. So that's 2 parts. And then the third part is the part where you have ambiguity analysis, what I like to call ambiguity analysis. And that is the magic. That's where you come up with new attacks that are not on the list, or new things that are not a dependency error. And so you got to be able to do all 3 of those things to do proper architecture risk analysis. If you're interested in that, there is a free version of chapter 5 available out there on the net. So I think if you go to swsec.com, you can download Chapter 5 for free now. So download it.
So tell us a bit more about what you touched on the S-bombs. It seems like
Okay.
you have a view in there that's going to be very interesting.
Well, the idea that you should have an inventory of what you have and keep your software up to date is a very important idea. But it's not going to solve the problem, because if you have an inventory filled with buggy software, it isn't going to fix the bugs. But you'll know that you have some buggy software, and so will your attacker. Congratulations. In fact, one of the things that the Tau group from the NSA was famous for doing was knowing what dependencies you had and waiting around for a problem to be found in those dependencies, which they then wrote an exploit for.
Mm-hmm.
So they, in some sense, had a better handle on your software bill of materials than you did as the target. And so you went down because of that. So I don't think that the SBOM stuff is a bad thing, but I also don't think that it's the be all end all of software security. And I think it's going to, turn into a big government bureaucratic piece of baloney that takes all the oxygen that we need to do smarter things with, like fix bugs and do architecture analysis.
But it's great that nowadays you can get an SBOM, compare it against the database, and see what flaws you have. And then your tool will happily tell you, hey, these are the flaws that you have. There's no solution for them yet.
Exactly. So just, go cry in your pillow.
Well, basically, exactly. So awareness is always good. And it's great to know that we are carrying all this risk. But I think that we have to be a bit more intelligent on the tail end of the thing. Okay, we identified all these things, but to have something that's going to help me jail the systems and put them into a more constrained situation until solution for that risk is going to is given, a patch comes out or something else happens. And I would love to have something like that going on.
I want to say this though. I mean, look, bottom line, SBOMs are really about dependencies. And dependency analysis is not a new thing. It's not something we haven't known about for 25 years. We have. So that.
There you go. One more thing that everybody's running around now that Gary was telling us about 20 years ago.
Not just me, everybody knew about
everybody, yeah. All right, next one. Oh, this is the one that I was waiting for. So in 2011, you co-authored Separating Threat from Hype, What Washington Needs to Know About Cybersecurity. 11 years later, are we at a better place with the, what was it called? The
National Cyber Strategy.
Exactly.
I think we are, because we got the government to say the word software security together, and we got them to say it a lot. And I think now that if you talk to a majority of technical people, they understand that software security is a thing they should be concerned about. And not only that, we know we've made lots of progress in the field. So yeah, I think that things are better in a sense of awareness, especially. Now, have we done the stuff that we could do, like have an arms race for the common good with regard to software analysis and outspend our adversaries with regard to building better software? No, we haven't, but we sure can. And I would like to see the government focus on that. The problem with the government is it's slow and it likes bureaucratic stuff, checklists and frameworks and vague hand wavy things and lots of paper. And that's not necessarily bad because it gets people thinking about this and it makes some vendors do the right thing. That's good. But it's not, we're not going to solve the software security problem with a bunch of paper or some government regulation. We're just going to solve it by fixing our busted code. So go fix your code.
So lately there has been this initiative coming out finally of a sort of a National Transport Security Board, but for cyber incidents, for lack of a better word. I think that's great. I think it's awesome. It's bringing things up to the front. But when you look at the whole security debt that we have, especially at the infrastructure level, water dam controllers, gasoline station control, all this stuff exposed out there, how would you start tackling that security debt? How do you go back to things that are so old that perhaps nobody knows how to manage them? Or
Yeah, I mean, we have three problems that I've always called the trinity of trouble. Everything is connected. You know, everything is extensible. Actually, some things are not, but everything could be extensible. And everything is more complicated than it used to be. So those things are the friend of the attacker. But in some sense, if we put things on the net, we should be able to update them more automatically. And we're better about software update now and patching than we ever used to be. So that's good. Our response can be pretty fast. However, I think that in the early days of computer security, everything was about whether or not you configured your system properly. Did you mark off certain ports? Did you have the right version of FTP daemon running? And so on. It was all configuration stuff. And we got away from that. And now we're right back at it because guess what? DevOps means that the developers have to do the configuration stuff.
Yep.
And they often don't know how to do that. However, there's another trend that makes that makes me more optimistic, and that is the idea of cloud infrastructure. Because if the servers are running at say Google or maybe Microsoft or somewhere else, Amazon, then they're going to be better maintained by their IT guys than they would be maintained by your IT people. Sorry, but their IT people are better. And so that's a good thing. But the stuff you build to put in those servers isn't better. So we still have a long way to go, but configuration wise, we've made a lot of progress. So the question is this: are we making progress as fast as we're adopting technology? And the answer is, it's neck and neck.
But that's my problem. I mean, okay, let's go back a second. You say that the government is basically defined by bureaucracy and likes that and likes laws and stuff like that. But right now, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the imperative for adding security to new things is either because it's the moral thing to do or because it's the commercially wise thing to do. You want to be able to keep selling your product, so you need it to be secure.
Yes.
And I'm asking myself if at some point, especially looking back at the security depth of the things that are already out there and are not as easy to patch or as easy to maintain and stuff like that, do we need another imperative coming from the law side of things saying you have to go back and look at your stuff?
No, I don't think so. I am not a big fan of regulation, never really have been, because I don't think it works very well. Especially when the regulation is written by a bunch of people that are lobbying big corporations. So I'm not a big fan of that. On the other hand, I think that the market did in fact make Microsoft get their shit together.
Yep.
Remember when Gates wrote the Gates memo? That wasn't because somebody made him do it. It was like what happened was customers' expectations, they expected things to be secure, were not matching up with reality. There was a gap between expectations and security reality. That gap had to be filled. And I think that that's the most powerful thing. So as people begin to understand computer security, I hate to say cyber, but cyber security stuff out there in the general public, they're going to demand that their things that they buy are secure, and they're going to have to be. So you aren't going to be able to get away with building horrible stuff. Now we can have organizations like the FTC getting into the shorts of corporations that lie to consumers, like the people who made various routers that you couldn't update the BIOS and they were just woefully out of date and came configured insecurely. But they were claiming they were secure. So the FTC went to that company and said, or those companies and said, stop lying to consumers. And I think that's good. Companies shouldn't be allowed to lie, but the market can decide what is secure enough, and it has been deciding, and I think we're making progress along those lines, even though it's the market that's driving.
So if I hear you correctly, the stuff that we have sitting around that needs to be fixed. Let's let it naturally die and be substituted by new products. And these products will already have more security because now we care more about security.
I hope so. That's the hope. It may not match with reality, but it's sort of amazing that all of our stuff really works. I mean, and I don't just mean technology. I mean, the power grid kind of stays up, and it's just like a big, huge kludge. It's always been a kludge, and we're a bunch of primates doing silly kludges on the surface of a insignificant planet in a galaxy that doesn't matter. And it's very, very interesting to participate in that.
Very Python-esque.
Back to philosophy.
Right. So now bringing it back to the question. So okay, so the hype and the truth.
Yeah.
In this world of misinformation that we live in.
Yeah.
When somebody, say from your family, comes running to you and says, I read that artificial intelligence is going to consume us all, and let's go back to the cave before that happens.
Yeah.
How do you get them out of the hype and into the reality of things?
That's a really good question. One of the things that I did this summer, which I'm very proud of, is I gave a talk on machine learning security for my local community because they asked me to. And so I went, and there weren't that many people there, maybe about 40. And the week before that, 3 days before that, in fact, I gave a keynote for 700 people in Germany at the Troopers Conference. So I gave about the same stuff, but for normal human beings in my community. And I tried to explain to them what's really happening and let them ask questions and sort of caught them up with the edge of technology. And that was a very, very interesting and fun thing to do. I'm getting ready to do it again next Thursday at a retirement center where a lot of, interesting people that are retired have gone to live. And they're wondering about machine learning security too. Some of them heard me speak at the community thing, and they want me to do a version over there. So one of the things that we can all do as geeks is try to communicate with normals and explain what's really happening and listen carefully to what their preconceived notions are, and don't make fun of them. Just try to explain how things really work so that they'll be less scared. Remember, society takes a long time for ideas to sink in. Telephone used to be magic and scary to people. There were articles in the newspaper in the 1800s about telephone murders because the telephone was used as a tool in a murder or something like that. Yeah, and electricity.
Right. Yeah.
And we had a long time for those technologies to go into society. The adoption curve was not so steep. Now the adoption curve of technology is very, very steep.
Yeah.
So we haven't had that long to let it sink in. And that means that our job as technologists is to describe that stuff realistically to these people who are perfectly smart human beings. They're just not technology people, so that they can understand what we're building and why we need to do it certain ways.
And when explaining to those people, not in a haha, let's make fun out of it, but in a let's learn from the question, was there any question that came up that you thought, well, that's one that I'm going to remember?
Every time I give a talk, that happens. And one of the powerful things about giving the same talk 200 times is you get these questions that at first you think, now who would ask me that question? And then later you can make sure that question doesn't come up in the minds of listeners because you've seen that angle. I think about it as kind of ray tracing, where you use rays to trace and build a model of a thing back in the graphics days. And I think of all the human minds that are asking questions during a talk as sending rays in, and it gives you a much more profound understanding of your own material when you do that kind of public speaking. So I would encourage everybody out there who's working hard on the edge of technology to talk about it with as many people as you can, because that'll inform your own thinking about what's actually happening and how to describe it.
Is there any of those that comes to mind as an example that you remember?
No, not really.
It's a hit of the moment thing.
Yeah, it's sort of a heat of the thing. and one of the things that you do when you're speaking to a group like that is you watch and see who's getting lost, and
Yep.
go back and pick up a
The body
stitch,
language. Yep.
see if they're, yeah, exactly.
It's funny,
So
but when you're standing in front of a bunch of people giving those kinds of ideas, you actually get a physical reaction of people that like retract from you, people who lean in, people who
yeah,
sort of like,
I
what
miss
are you
I
talking
miss
about
that so much. My God,
so
during
much?
COVID, I gave probably 100 talks over Zoom, and I hate it. I hate giving talks over Zoom, because when you give a talk in a room full of people, you get so much energy back. It's like performing live music. So
Yes.
much energy
Oh,
comes from the crowd, and I thrive on that energy. One of the first talks I gave after COVID was a keynote for the Paranoia conference in Oslo. And I barely got into Norway, which is a hilarious story of its own right. But I did get in, and I gave this keynote, and my friend Joran Breivik, he said, wow, I could see you on stage when you began to talk. You were sort of a little bit, but as soon as you started talking, you started getting the energy. I watched your battery go woo and fill all the way up.
Yeah.
And I was like, I felt it too. I felt my battery recharging by speaking to humans in the same room. So I can't wait to do more of that. I love giving talks about stuff.
Totally, and you're so good at it.
Well, thanks.
So, practically speaking, do you think that everybody that deals with security, a security practitioner, must be a coder? That's a question that Chris Romeo brought up lately, and I've heard all kinds.
No, I don't. I think that anybody who's working in software security should be a coder. They don't have to be a developer today, right? An active developer, but they have to know an awful lot about software to be an effective software security person. I think that there are plenty of network people that are great security people that don't know very much about software at all, and we need them. And there are many different kinds of people we need in our field, just the way there are many different kinds of doctors that we need in the medical profession. Or it goes all the way from emergency medical technician through, nurse, through nurse practitioner, to doctor, to specialist, to surgeon, to certain, brain surgeon. And that's a big pile of people and a big range. We have the same range in computer security. We have people that need to do the patching, that need to do IT stuff. We have people who need to build systems for us to use. We have people who need to build applications on top of systems. And all of those kinds of security have different sorts of key capabilities that need to be there. So once again, I'll say, if you're going to be a software security person, I do hope that you're a developer first, and that you know how to code. But if you're going to be in computer security, we got room for lots and lots and lots and lots of people who aren't coders.
That's great that you put it like this, because one of the questions that did not make it into the list because of numbers was if somebody had to know every single thing, monitoring and patching and coding, to be good at security. And your answer is there, no, you can specialize and you go down your niche and you get good at that thing.
Absolutely. Yep.
With that said, one thing that I'm very curious to hear is, now that we are doing asterisk as code, everything is as code.
Yeah.
Do you think that changes a bit?
I think it does. I think we see that change with DevOps. And remember, dev and ops, the whole idea is to make infrastructure as code, which means that if you're going to conjure up the infrastructure using code, you better not screw it up. You need to know more about infrastructure than you used to before. And this has always been a tension. I remember the tension between development and IT when it came to security. And dev would do a build and then they would ship it, and IT wouldn't give it the right privilege, and the people would say, just chmod it 777, and security would go, oh my God, no, don't do that. So there's always been this operations development tension in the world, but now we're cramming everybody onto the same team, which is pretty hilarious. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah,
so
the line was, it works on my machine.
Yeah, that's right. I tested it once, or worse yet, it compiled, so ship it. Yeah, so sure. Um, I think there are always going to be some technology people that are just amazingly, profoundly good at everything, and we need them, just like we need super brain specialist people. But everybody doesn't have to be like that, and we need lots and lots of people in the field. So if you're concerned because you're not a coder and you want to do some aspects of computer security, there's tons of room for you. Don't worry about it.
Awesome. What keeps you awake at night, security-wise? I think that it rolls back on everything that we talked about in the last hour.
Nothing. I sleep so well.
I
I'm
did not
actually
expect that one.
I'm actually optimistic security veteran. I got gray hair, I got gray beard. I've been doing this for 27 years at least. And I still think we're making progress. I don't think we've solved all the world's problems, but I think we know how to solve a lot more than we used to know. And that's a cause for optimism. So I don't worry about stuff. My bandmates make fun of me because they worry about things. And I'm just not a natural worrier. I just am a forward going, I got stuff to do in that direction sort of a person. And that is my own bias, which I think is probably a helpful perspective to have when you're going
Wait,
to.
I thought you had to be paranoid to work in this field.
What's that?
I thought you had to be a paranoid to work in this field.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think you need to be able to think like a bad person, and you need to be able to model malicious behavior and understand it. And you need to understand that sometimes the rules don't matter. Nobody follow the rules. That's what I did. For example, if you cram a terabyte into a name field that's supposed to be 50 characters, some developers would go, well, who would do that? And I mean, we all know who would do that, me. so the idea of let's take things apart and find out how they work and put them back together a better way and improve the design, improve the implementation, that's always driven my philosophy. And I think that drives the philosophy of everybody in software security and application security.
Very, very cool. Okay, so we are almost there, 10 minutes. So the chat is open. If anybody has a question, please feel free to step in. Meanwhile, thank you so much, Gary. It was a pleasure as always.
It's my pleasure.
I
can't wait to see some of you guys in person. You people. Yeah. I really miss seeing everybody in person, and I'm pretty psyched to be traveling again. Like I said, I was in Germany this summer and going back to Norway in a couple of weeks and speaking in the US in real groups of actual humans in chairs.
What's your next gig?
The next thing I'm doing is I'm sitting on a PhD committee.
But in terms of talks, where are you talking next? Oh, lost you.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. So in terms of talks, what's your next talk?
I don't know what my next talk is. Oh, yeah, it's in Trondheim, actually. I'm speaking at the university there after we do the defense. The next day, I'm going to talk about machine learning security for those people.
Very, very cool. Okay, and here's Dennis. Dennis, I made you a host. Did it work? Apparently not. Wait. Switchtology problem.
I'm on the chat too. If people want to ask a question, that would certainly welcome to do that.
The other deans on the bottom. Oh, this one. Wait a second. Yeah, I'm trying to. Wait, apparently I have to I have to make Dennis a host first of all, and I am not managing to do that for some reason. what's happening here? This. Dennis, it's showing you as a host.
He's just muted, so you need to.
Yeah,
unmute him.
I'm trying to. But
There's another Denise at the bottom.
I see both of
Oh.
them. I'm trying to right click on both of them and it's not working.
Hey, I think that
There.
works. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Good.
Hey there.
Sorry, I'm actually cycling because I'm playing football in soccer in 10 minutes. Amazing stuff, Gary, as always. I have a couple of questions, if you still have a couple of minutes.
I'm all ears. Fire away.
So one question is one of the things I've been trying to do is to attract talent from outside cybersecurity into
Yeah.
security. And
think
the premise here is to attract people who are more senior in a way in their career than
Uh-huh.
the role you're applying to, and
Yep.
then saying, look, in a way you don't have cybersecurity experience, but you have experience in other areas. And given the fact that the job market is quite hot, economically actually makes a lot of sense. So my question to you is, what is a great way to measure almost that interest, that passion for the people who are jumping into cybersecurity, which clearly won't have cybersecurity experience, but have a huge amount of other things that they can bring to the table?
Well, I would say demonstrating an open mind and curiosity to learn new things is critical. So if you can assess that, that'll give you some idea about how they're going to approach computer security and may let you know whether they're going to be successful or not. Lots of people have come into this field, and one of the things that was very interesting in the early days, in say 1995, when I was getting into this field, I was coming from cognitive science and computer science background, AI, and I became a computer security person. I never took a computer security class in my whole life, ever. Not even one.
Yeah.
And Dan Gear, same thing. He was a biostatistician, and one of the things that we got was this renaissance field in the field because everybody came with different perspectives, and there were a lot of super smart people working in the field. So if you find somebody with the right curiosity, good pile of experience running people, who understands human nature and who wants to learn about computer security, that's great. I would encourage you to get them on your team.
Yeah, that's a very good data point, because what I'm finding is exactly sort of that, which is there's a lot of people, in a way, it's an attractive field, right? But what I'm kind of finding is that, during the recruitment process, the really special ones are the ones that get into it. And in a way, they almost use that recruitment as an excuse to get into cybersecurity, and they fell in love with cybersecurity, right? And in a brutal way, that's what you want to see, right? Because it's actually a really cool field, right? It's really exciting once you get into it.
I totally agree. And like I've said multiple times during this AMA, we got plenty of room in the field. There's lots to do. Pick up a bucket and a mop and help us mop the floor.
Yeah. And that means that we don't have, in a way, a skill shortage. What we have is almost a skill transfer problem, right? How can we make it more friendly for more diverse teams and individuals to join cybersecurity and application security?
And frankly, people like you help a lot, Dennis, because you're friendly and gregarious, and you will attract people to want to do that. So part of it is leadership skills that we are lacking in some sense in cybersecurity, and we need more leadership skills of the sort that you guys are demonstrating. And so that will help to bring other leaders in. That'll be good. I see there's another question on the chat. Should we do that one?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so there's a question from Stefano that says, what about the latest ML models that are able to create software? Would trusting these models bring us 10 years back? The answer is, you know what? They're parrots, and they parrot software whether it's good or bad. So yeah, they're going to make bugs, and if you train up a machine learning model on the software pile that has bugs, don't be surprised when it creates more software that also has the same kind of bug. There's
Garbage
no
in,
magic.
garbage out.
It's sort of, machine learning is statistical pile in and the statistical file out. And so statistically speaking, we're going to get what we put in. There's no magic way to write software that machine learning can do. I will tell you this, some people are a little bit steal somebody's idea how to do a function. Who should get credit for that? Question that we don't really have answered. Same with creativity. If we have a machine learning model that is, you know, stealing ideas from other people just by mimicking them, you have to watch out. It's an interesting thing. So I'm not worried that machine learning is going to take over all programming anytime soon. Good question. Thanks, Stefano. Dennis, do you have another one?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm finding, you know, and I wanted to see, because, you know, your data points on this is that more and more when we talk about software security and application security, the real challenges are business challenge. Like the problems we have are almost like business problems. So are you finding that you're able to have more and more influence in how the business operates, in how the business manage risks, how they think about how they're building things, from the sort of the thinking that we bring, and almost like the engineering, if anything, excellence, right, that we try to put from security? Because ultimately good software is secure software, isn't it? Or well engineered software is secure software.
The answer is it depends on the CISO and the culture of the company. The best CISOs sit at the table with the rest of the executives, and they are the same. They're not like a plumber in another room. You call and say, hey, why doesn't the hot water work? That's not how that works. Instead, a real CISO who's an enabler, according to the CISO report tribes, tribe number 1, is the sort of person who can make sure that when things are built, security is thought about, and that security plays a role in all these business decisions. And by the way, the answer is always, the answer is very seldom, don't do that. But it's, if you're gonna do that, do it this way.
Yeah.
And that's a very important insight for people who want to get up the food chain in security. You can't just stand around saying no, and you can't just run around throwing bombs at stuff and blowing things up and hacking and penetration tests. Instead, you have to teach people about thinking about how much to spend on security and how to spend it and where our security posture should be. All of those questions really matter to upper management and firms that have the right sorts of culture.
Yeah, but I've seen data and I've experienced myself where a well-architecture, well-secure environment and system is actually faster, more efficient, more business effective, in a way cheaper to operate. And in fact, it allows the business to deliver the objectives that they want, right? So it's kind of like there's a great advantage of saying that, you know, building security is not just built like this. It's that if you do it in this engineering way, it's actually more efficient for the business.
Absolutely, especially if you take into account total cost of ownership.
Yeah.
One of the key things that Phil Venables did when he was at Goldman Sachs before he became the global CISO of Alphabet, which is of course the parent company of Google, was thinking about not just how much it costs to build a piece of software, but how much it also costs to maintain it over the first year. And when you tell the software builders, by the way, we need you to estimate the maintenance budget, and if you get it wrong, we're going to come grab your bonus back, quality things change. It's like squeezing a balloon. If instead you say, you have to ship it by next week and here's your budget, they'll go, okay, it's shipped, but quality will suck and the maintenance budget will go, you know, astronomical. And so that idea of total cost of ownership of software over time is a really important insight into management thinking and risk mitigation, risk control at the executive level.
Brilliant. I think Izar, that's a great way to end it. What a great, positioning for security where we add value to that total cost of ownership.
Yeah, and if you guys are interested, I would encourage you, if you haven't read it, to read the CISO report, which is you can find on my website. Because one of the things that I found out was a lot of people were saying what CISOs think, but they weren't CISOs. So I went and asked all my friends who were, what's really happening, and wrote it down. And it's very interesting. It's not what you read in the usual, Gartner stuff. It's much more realistic. So check that out, among other things. This has been great. Thanks a lot for the interesting questions you collected, and excellent job hosting. Great chatting with all of you people. And I look forward to seeing you in person someday.
Same here.
And to play with you, Gary. We have to play again together.
Rage Against the Machine Learning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.